Right now, the smartest investors on Earth are quietly betting billions on one prediction: that the next great war won't be fought over oil, it will be fought over water. And they may already be right, because at this very moment, a water treaty between two nuclear-armed enemies lies dead. A capital city of 15 million is discussing evacuation because its taps are running dry. And on the roof of the world, one country is building the biggest dam in human history, a single structure that could control the water of 2 billion people. This is not a story about the future. The water wars have already begun. The only question is, why has nobody told you? Let's start with a man you might know from a Hollywood movie. Michael Burry, the investor who predicted the 2008 financial crash when the whole world laughed at him. The Big Short was made about him. He walked away with hundreds of millions. And when people asked what his next big bet was, his answer was one word: water. For years, that sounded crazy. Then, in December 2020, while the world was distracted by a pandemic, something appeared quietly on the Chicago Exchange that had never existed in human history: a futures market for water, meaning traders could now bet on the price of water, the same way they bet on oil and gold. The United Nations' own water expert sounded the alarm, saying he was deeply concerned that water was now being treated like gold and oil on Wall Street. Almost nobody heard him. Meanwhile, on the ground, the quiet buying had already started. Investment firms from New York began purchasing farmland across the dry American West, not because they wanted farms. They wanted the water underneath. One firm bought up the water rights of an entire town in Arizona, a desert state in the American Southwest, and sold that water to a city suburb 175 miles away. Local officials started calling these investors vultures, drought profiteers. Farmers watched the water their families had used for a century get sold to the highest bidder. One investment firm even put it in writing on its own website: "Scarce clean water will define this century, the way oil defined the last one." Read that again. They're not predicting it, they're counting on it. And here's the rule we've learned making this channel: smart money never moves after a war, it moves before. So what exactly does Wall Street see coming? Simple: the math. And the math is terrifying. Here's the number that explains everything. Of all the water on Earth, less than 1% is fresh and actually reachable for humans. That's it. That single drop has to feed 8 billion people. And demand keeps exploding. By 2030, the world is expected to need around 40% more water than it can supply. But here's the part the news never explains properly. The crisis isn't really about drinking water. About 70% of all fresh water goes into growing food. You drink 2 liters a day, but counting what's in your meals, you consume thousands. So when water runs out, it's not your shower that stops first. It's the food supply. And to keep the food coming, humanity is doing something genuinely insane. We are draining aquifers, giant natural water tanks deep under the ground that took thousands of years to fill, and we're emptying them in decades, like a man burning his life savings in a weekend. Satellites show most of the world's largest aquifers are already past the danger point. What does it look like when the tank hits empty? It already has names. Cape Town, a city of 4 million in South Africa, came within weeks of day zero in 2018, the day the taps shut off completely. Armed guards stood at natural springs. In Delhi, India's giant capital, a literal water mafia rules the night. Criminal gangs pumping water from illegal wells and selling it from tanker trucks because the city can't supply everyone. And right now, the most shocking case on earth. Tehran, the capital of Iran, home to 15 million people. After the driest autumn in 50 years, 19 of the country's major dams have effectively run dry. And Iran's own president said words no leader should ever have to say: if it doesn't rain, we ration water. If it still doesn't rain, we may have to evacuate Tehran, a national capital, evacuated, not by war, by thirst. And when the water breaks down inside a country, you get mafias and protests. But when it breaks down between countries, someone puts a hand on the tap. There's a place most people couldn't find on a map that may decide Asia's future. The Tibetan Plateau, a vast frozen highland in western China, the highest place on Earth. They call it the third pole because it holds more frozen water than anywhere outside the Arctic and Antarctic. Nearly every great river of Asia is born there. The water that flows down from that one plateau eventually serves around 2 billion people, and all of it sits inside the borders of one country, China. Here's the detail that should worry every nation downstream. China has never signed a single water-sharing treaty with any of its neighbors. Not one. We've already seen what that means in practice. The Mekong, a river born in Tibet that feeds 5 countries of Southeast Asia and 60 million people, has been dammed again and again inside China. And researchers found that during one devastating drought, while farmers and fishermen downstream watched the river drop to record lows, Chinese reservoirs upstream were holding record amounts of water. The tap was working fine, it just wasn't open. And now comes the escalation that changes everything. In July 2025, China broke ground on the Medog mega dam, built on the Brahmaputra, one of Asia's mightiest rivers, born in Tibet, flowing through India and Bangladesh, feeding hundreds of millions. The project is almost beyond imagination. 5 giant dams stacked in a Himalayan gorge, costing around $137 billion, producing triple the power of the 3 gorges, currently the biggest dam on Earth. It is the largest infrastructure project in human history, and its location is the whole story. It sits just before the river crosses into India. One Indian state leader called it exactly what India fears it is, a water bomb hanging over their heads. Because whoever controls that canyon controls the dry season flow, the flood pulses, and the silt that feeds the farmland of 2 of the most crowded nations on Earth. India is furious. India is afraid. And here's the dark twist. India is holding the exact same weapon, pointed at someone else. To the west flows the Indus, a river system born in the Himalayas that passes through India before becoming Pakistan's lifeline. And we mean lifeline literally. The Indus waters the vast majority of Pakistan's farmland. No Indus, no Pakistan. In 1960, the 2 countries signed the Indus Waters Treaty, a deal so solid it survived 3 full wars between them. For 65 years, through gunfire and hatred, the water kept flowing. Then came April 2025. Gunmen massacred 26 tourists in Kashmir, the disputed mountain region both nations claim. India blamed Pakistan. Pakistan denied it. And India did something 65 years of war had never done. It suspended the treaty, the first time in history. India's prime minister declared that blood and water cannot flow together, that Pakistan would not get the water India controls. And a Pakistani leader answered with a sentence that should chill you. Either our water flows in this river, or their blood. Weeks later, the 2 countries were firing missiles at each other, 2 nuclear powers, trading fire, with a river in the middle. And here's what makes this bigger than one region. It didn't blow over. A year later, the treaty is still dead. India is approving new dam projects on the very rivers Pakistan depends on. Pakistan has dragged the fight to the United Nations Security Council. International courts have ruled, and India has rejected the rulings outright. Think about what that precedent means. The strongest water treaty ever written, the one that survived 3 wars, died in a single afternoon. Every downstream nation on Earth watched that happen and understood the same thing. Paper doesn't protect you anymore. And if you think this is still tomorrow's war, look closer. Water is already a weapon on today's battlefields. Let us show you, one conflict at a time. Start in Ukraine. In 2023, in the middle of the war, the Kakhovka Dam, a giant Soviet-era dam holding back an entire reservoir in southern Ukraine, was blown apart. A wall of water erased whole towns downstream. Tens of thousands lost their homes. And here's what most people never noticed. Water was part of that war from day one. When Russia first invaded, one of its earliest moves was to destroy the barrier Ukraine had built to cut off water to Crimea, the peninsula Russia seized in 2014, which had been desperately short of water ever since. They weren't just invading for land, they were invading for the tap. Now move to Iraq. When the terror group ISIS stormed across Iraq and Syria, their commanders went straight for something unexpected: the dams. They seized Iraq's largest dam at Mosul and held millions of people hostage with it, because whoever holds the dam can flood the cities below or cut their water entirely without firing a shot. Now to Africa. Ethiopia, a rising nation of around 130 million people in East Africa, has built a colossal dam on the Nile, the river that has fed Egypt for 5,000 years. For Ethiopia, the dam means electricity and pride. They inaugurated it in 2025 with celebrations. But downstream sits Egypt, a desert nation of over 100 million who get almost all their fresh water from that single river. Egypt's leaders have called the dam an existential threat and hinted at military options. Even a US president once predicted casually that Egypt would end up blowing that dam up.
It's a very dangerous situation because Egypt is not going to be able to live that way. And they'll end up blowing up the dam. And I said it, and I say it loud and clear. They'll blow up that dam.
3 different continents, the same pattern. And here's the chilling part. A mega dam is the perfect modern weapon. Too essential to bomb, destroying one drowns innocent people, like Kakhovka. Too powerful to ignore, it controls life itself downstream. And completely legal to build. The last century armed itself with oil. This century is quietly arming itself with water. Which brings us back to the ticker. Remember Michael Burry's one-word answer? It doesn't sound crazy anymore. The treaty is dead, the mega dam is rising, the capital is rationing, and the water market is live on the Chicago Exchange, ticking away quietly while the world watches other wars. Everyone keeps asking the same question. When will the water wars begin? That's the wrong question. Wars over survival don't begin with declarations. They begin with positions. A ticker symbol, a suspended treaty, a turbine switching on, a small town's water sold to a fund 1,000 miles away. Oil built the last century's empires. But here's the difference, and it's the one that should keep you thinking tonight. You can live without oil. There is a substitute for everything, except water. No alternative, no backup, no second source. So the only question left is the one almost nobody thinks to ask. Who owns the water under your feet, and when did you last check? The thing that matters most is usually the thing you never look at. We reveal them every week. Subscribe and stay one step ahead with us.